This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geek show number 552, recorded on November 10th, 2022. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in what was a beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. The weather changed on us. We went from like 80 to 20 in the course of the day. Dave Hamilton is here from Mac Geek Gab. Dave, you're on the East Coast. It's coming towards you. You know it's going to get cold, right?
It is, yeah. It was 80 degrees, almost 80 degrees here last weekend, which is unseasonably, right. Like apocalyptic concerns, But yeah. I had to uncover the air conditioner here in the studio last weekend.
Because you still needed it for.
I had some band rehearsals. It was like, no, there was 6 people in here. This isn't going to work.
Yeah, this is not going to work.
Yeah, but yeah, we are due to get rain, but it's going to be back up to like 70 all weekend. So we're not. Yeah. I don't think we're going to get like overly hammered, but we're going to get like an inch of rain in 18 hours. It's coming.
The My Radar that's up on my screen right here says 35 in Omaha right now.
Yeah.
It's coming your way because it always is. Well, it's we're not out here to talk about the weather, but you guys know I love to do that. Of course, we'll post the show with some world-class show notes out at theaverageguy.tv. Big thanks to Marv B, who joined me. We know him as Uncle Marv from the IT Business Podcast. He was here last week. Big thanks, Marv. He's in the chat room right now.
That was a great show, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. He's a ton of fun to have on. And then, of course, big thanks to our Patreon subscribers. If you find that we're adding value to your life and you want to give it back, you can do that on Patreon, theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. We'll get you there as well. I introduced him earlier, but we'll do it again. Dave Hamilton is with me from Mac Geek Gab, and that's hard to say fast.
Easy for you.
Dave.
Mac Geek Gab. I've done it so many times that it rolls off the back of my mouth. I was going to say the tongue, but it's really this guttural thing. Yeah.
No, welcome. Great to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love what you're doing with the show, and I'm honored to be here.
We are both veterans of podcasting a long time. You even longer than me, about 900 shows on that, which is just amazing to me that you've done it that long. For new listeners to Home Gadget Geeks who may not know what Mac Geek Gab is, can you give me the 2-minute elevator speech when people say, Dave, what is it you say you do here?
Yeah, we are a Q&A show for Apple users is what, and I'm happy to talk about the evolution of that if you'd like to get into it, but that's what we are now. And since episode 3, that's what we've been. We take questions from our audience. We answer the questions to the best of our ability on the show. We also share quick tips and cool stuff found, things that we like, gadgets. And so the idea is everybody learns at least 5 new things from every single episode. And that includes me and John F. Braun, my co-host, and Pilot Pete, my co-host. It's all about learning and expanding our knowledge base.
And I'm assuming, it's very specific to Apple products, Apple gadgets, right? Do you guys get outside of that?
Big time. Yeah. We are all Apple users, but being an Apple user doesn't mean that you don't use products that are made by other vendors. Like, Synology's disk stations are a huge focus of the show. Routers in general have always been a topic of conversation. We were really amongst the first to be doing mesh networking. We were doing mesh networking before Eero came out with like quasi mesh stuff. And so that's been a topic of conversation. The whole, the home, the IoT stuff, Apple HomeKit's fine, but it's limited. So a lot of our IoT conversations revolve around Amazon's A-Lady. I've learned not to say that when I'm recording because people don't like it when I trigger their A-Lady. Yeah. But yeah, so there's we talk about all kinds of things inside and outside of Apple's ecosphere, if you will.
But you kind of focused, that's the core, which you spend a lot of time talking about.
It is the core. It's pretty rare that we're talking about Windows or Android is what it is. I used to do a ton of Windows consulting. So like that knowledge base is there. maybe it's not quite as relevant today as it was when we started the show 17 and a half years ago, but there you go. Yeah.
What in the Apple space keeps you going on a regular basis? I mean, what do you get most excited about when you think about, and maybe it varies from time to time, season to season, but as you think about like right now, what's driving audience engagement? What are they asking for the most in
Well,
that space?
it really, the thing that drives me to do the show from a content standpoint is our audience, the engagement with them, the interaction. That's the part that has fueled us along for these 17 plus years. Without that, if we had to come up with the topics every week, man, I don't know. But I say that, and I also do 2 other shows that are now each 7 years old. One called Business Brain, the other one called Gig Gab for working musicians. And by and large, we come up with our own topics. So who knows? But certainly for Mac Geek Gab, that interaction with the audience, the engagement is the thing. And right now, Apple just released 3 new operating systems. macOS Ventura brings a lot of quirky elements that have been interesting to help people. And when I say people, I am amongst them, helping us all figure out how to smoothly use our Macs with this new operating system. Not a ton has changed, but enough has that it's like, why did they do this? Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
No, right on. I have noticed my phone, my watch, and my Mac Mini have all updated. And I mean, they didn't do it for me. I agree.
Yeah.
To do it. Let's just be really clear about that.
Yeah.
But
I say 3 new operating systems. You're right. It's 5 because they've got the Mac, the iPhone, the iPad, the watch, and the TV. So
right. Yeah. And I haven't done Mac TV, I haven't done the Apple TV. There we go.
Yeah.
Just yet. But those have been the 3 primary that I've done. I haven't really had, with the exception of noticing some font changes and a little bit different functionality. I know now I can use my iPhone as a camera with Ventura, right? Which seems pretty cool.
That's what I'm doing for the video here. I'm not doing it with Apple's functionality because I don't put the latest operating system on my podcasting rig right out of the gate. I've got a PreSonus external interface that I use, and it's best to wait a little bit.
Ecamm would do the same thing for you, right? You could use the Ecamm software to run.
I'm using Reincubate's Camo to do it so that I can feed that directly as a camera. But there's another app called Shoot that does the same thing, and you can really tweak the. The iPhone is the best webcam you can buy. Dollars for donuts. If I could spend $400 on a webcam that was actually good, I would. But it does not exist. And I think the reason is the iPhone benefits from not just hardware, but all the software. There's so much math happening to make our pictures look good on the iPhone. And when you use the iPhone as your webcam, you just automatically get to leverage all of that. Great. Yeah. So
I did that for a while, and what I found is it's not convenient to have your phone. Like there's moments during the podcast where I'm grabbing my phone to do some things, and when it's my webcam,
I have a spare phone. Yeah,
well, see that, and that's probably the way to get it done. That way. But
you could get an iPhone SE Gen 3, right? And I think like refurb, they're between $300 and $400, and you're golden. You've got every bit of functionality you need, and then your daily driver iPhone is in your hand.
Mm-hmm. That maybe a good idea to get that done, and you can do it wirelessly now. Right? Yeah, and because the Ecamm, which is what I used before to make that work, always required a wire to get it done, and that's okay. You can run it up. It works.
I got enough wires around here. I'm still Reincubate Camo now supports wireless, but I still have a wire. I mean, it needs to be charged, and it's permanently here, so it doesn't matter. Yeah.
I have a watch version 4, so that's one of those things, like I'm just not that willing to upgrade my watch. Like we used to buy watches and we'd wear them for 10 years and then you would get another watch, and so I'm still kind of in that mode. Now they made some nice changes with the new watch OS and the way that works, but I haven't really found that compelling of a reason to go. I think we're on version 8 at this point. Are you a watch guy, and is there a reason to go from 4 to 8 at this point?
So I am a watch guy, and also I have an Apple Watch. I very much like mechanical watches. I like the technology of an automatic watch. and I love that it doesn't have a battery in it.
Right.
But I also love the functionality of my Apple Watch. I don't know many people who upgrade their watch hardware every year. Some people, of course, do, but I don't. I'm still on a Series 5 here. That was my first watch since the OG watch. And the thing that I will say, the difference for you from the Series 4 to anything newer than that is the always on display. That's for me, that was a big difference. And I think for a lot of people to be able, while I'm in the middle of a conversation, to just sort of glance at the watch and not have to, flick my wrist exactly the right way to get it to light up. I can just see what time it is, tap it. Yeah, exactly. Because now, I'm not paying attention. I'm watching the clock. Whereas otherwise I can just, a quick glance and it's right there. So that part I like of the Series 5. I actually bought a Series 8. My co-host at Mac Geek Gab, John, had never had an Apple Watch. And when I was with him a couple of weeks ago, we decided, let's both buy Apple Watches. We did them on the Amazon, Prime Day deal or whatever. Right. And when it arrived, I was like, what do I need this for? My dad's got a birthday coming up. I talked to him about it. He was very interested in the idea of having an Apple Watch. He rides his bike all the time. And so and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. This is much better suited for him than me. It doesn't mean I won't get a Series 8, but it means that I literally had one and didn't even open the box.
Well, that says something. But I had trouble reconciling for the longest time, like, of having a full-time watch like I couldn't ever wear another watch again, because it was like, I want to get the stats from this thing every day, all the time, everywhere I'm awake. Right. And I tried wearing it when I was sleeping for a while. And of course you'd roll over and the light would come on.
Sure.
And you can't get it to come on when you just look at it.
They fixed that, by the way. That part's all good now if it's in sleep mode. Yeah.
And it does. I've got that. But for a while, you turn over, I'd wear it at night. And I even contemplated for a while, like, okay, I'm going to wear my Apple Watch during the day and then put a Fitbit on at night because Fitbit's got some really good sleep tracking and some of those kind of things where I could alternate between the two. But it was at that moment, I'm like, I've got some nice watches. I'll never wear them again, and it was really hard. And it's not like I've gone back to the other watches, but it was for a while, it was really hard to reconcile that. Like, I'd still like to your point, I've got some nice mechanical watches that I'd like to wear, but I have a hard time taking this thing off. I mean, how do you work through that?
So for the most part, I wear my Apple Watch it's the watch I wear most frequently, but maybe 3 days a week. That's my normal MO. Since the end of July, I have been wearing my Apple Watch every day. I talked about this on Mac Geek Gab. My health is fine. I have to preface this conversation with that because otherwise people don't. But I have these like little fatty lumps called lipomas that are under my skin, and I've had them forever, and they're mostly fine, but occasionally they bother me. And this year I'd been developing too many of them in the wrong places, like in my elbows and stuff, and I was having to have surgery to have them removed. And it started impacting like my thought processes and my mental health. And so I was like, all right, I got to figure out how to stop these things from growing. And so I did all kinds of research, and even the fringes of the internet have no advice on how to not grow these things. But I reasoned, hey, if I develop less fat in my body, then I will have less of these things. I need to say that experiment failed miserably. But I have lost like 30 pounds since the end of July. Right. And so in tracking all of that, it's been handy to have my Apple Watch on. And so for the most part, I've been wearing it full time, not while I sleep, but, all day, every day. If I go out to dinner, I'll grab one of my, fancy mechanical watches or whatever, just to change it up. But even that, it's like, oh, I'm going to miss out on
steps.
I'm still doing the steps, even if the watch doesn't know. I have to say that to myself. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and there's some way to tie that in with the phone too, or you can have the phone, right?
Ish.
Yeah. It's not perfect, which for us, for those of us who are who like to complete things, they like We like complete records. We want 100% of the things. It's a real dilemma,
It is. I now understand that dilemma. I didn't up until July, but now that I've been kind of in it for a few months, it's like, how do I get out of this? I got to figure out how to not be obsessed.
When are you charging it then? If you're wearing it all the time,
I'm not wearing it at night. I'm charging it all night.
Okay,
yeah. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm tracking my sleep with it. I don't want to overshare here, but I don't like to wear anything while I sleep. So, we'll leave it at that.
No, I get it. I get it. But there are, as I've gotten older, I'm snoring more. I'm not sleeping as well.
Yeah.
There's some real things. And I guess I could put my phone on a stand and I think there's some sleep apps that would be running right off my phone.
Yeah. They'll record your snoring and play it back for you in the morning. Yeah.
Not that that's helpful. I know.
I mean, it might be helpful, but
it's like, I know I snore. I probably need to go do a sleep study. To get that done. That was always the question I always had about charging, was like, cause I wore it for maybe the first month. I got it at night while I was sleeping, and it was just, I toss and turn enough as it is. And then it was on. And so I thought, well, I'll just put it downstairs on my desk in the charger away from me. So I'm not even, contemplating, but I have thought about going Garmin at night to do some of this, because they've got some really good, I mean, that area of sleep tracking has gotten a lot better.
Yeah. It's not a bad thing to have this data. I understand how it is for people that get this data and it's distracting. I thankfully am not wired that way, at least not about this stuff at this moment. If I start having, I mean, I'm in fairly good health. In fact, I'm in great health. If that were to change, then I think, I would wind up being more obsessed about these things. But it is good to have that data. So yeah, I've thought about, could I track my sleep and in a way that didn't negatively impact my sleep? That would be a good thing. I do still have my OG Apple Watch, which miraculously, probably because I didn't wear it every day, the battery hasn't exploded on that yet, like it has on everybody else's. Right. But I don't think that one would track my sleep the way I would want it to. I don't think it's got the juice to do it. So I don't know.
I wear mine so much I've scratched the with work, working outside, and I built a whole retaining wall with it on. I shouldn't have, and I scratched it, kind of thing. But I wanted to get the activity tracking because I was working hard. It's one of those kinds of things.
No, I get it. I've been wearing mine when I play the drums, since July. And that was something I never did. So yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, no, it's right on. On episode 951, you guys talk a little bit about alert blindness. And one of the things I've noticed since the new upgrades, and not that it got worse, but it's just been noticeable. Like I am getting, you mentioned this just a second ago as we're talking, I am getting a ton of alerts on my watch so you're talking to somebody and my LinkedIn is letting me, and I'll look and somebody immediately says, you got to go. You got to leave. You got to go to the next.
That's the social signal, right? Is it, Yeah.
And so like I turned off Facebook notifications, those, and see, now my watch is talking to me because I just asked it a question, right?
Yeah.
When you guys talk about this and you think about alerting, I turned off Facebook. I still get my text still come through, but I don't get a lot of text. Facebook by far. I'm big on LinkedIn because that's what I use for work. And so I'm getting a lot of a LinkedIn. Is the answer to selectively choose what alerts make it through to be that way? Or is there something I'm missing on that?
So there's a couple different ways to have your cake and eat it too. Because the easy way is to just go on do not disturb all the time, and then it's not an issue, except that you're not getting the alerts you want. So one way certainly is, like you said, be very selective about which alerts pass through to your watch versus which ones are on your phone. The other is to take advantage of Apple's focus modes. I thought these were a worthless thing when they were first announced. I thought I'll never use that. And then it was like, it was probably my kids that were like, oh yeah, I use this focus mode when I'm, at school and doing this. And I'm like, wait. Okay, I'm starting to see it. And for example, when I come into the studio to podcast, I set a focus mode called podcasting, and it well, it does a couple things. First, it turns off notifications from everything and everyone except the 4 people technically, who are my co-hosts with shows. So if they text me, I will see it. Now, it does mean that right now, if any one of them happens to text me, I will get interrupted, right? But, it narrows the field down.
Yeah.
The other thing it does, because Apple's ecosystem is Apple's ecosystem, is I've got a automation that gets triggered when I turn on podcasting focus mode that turns on the purple light behind me. It turns off the air purifier here in the studio. And then when I turn off podcasting focus mode, it undoes all of that stuff. And so, but those focus modes can be great. Like, for example, I have one that I call nuclear. It's not what you think. It's probably not what you think. It only lets my nuclear family through to text me. And I wind up using it sometime in the evening, sometimes on the weekends. If we're going out, I want to be present with whatever I'm doing, but I definitely want my family to be able to get through to me. And it's especially handy if we're all somewhere together, because we will want to text each other. If we get split up, we'll text each other to, meet up or whatever. But it means that I get to completely avoid all the other stuff. So those focus modes, it's more granular than I would have expected from Apple out of the gate with something like that. And it really works. And now with iOS 16, you can have different lock screens on your phone based on focus mode. So you can sort of just know that you have a different picture and a different layout. But you can also change focus modes just by changing your lock screen. So it's an easy, seamless kind of thing. I'm shocked that I am singing its praises right now, but given how I felt about it initially. But I also didn't think the iPod was a good idea when Steve Jobs first announced that. So I've been wrong a couple times.
Can't be right all the time, Dave. Can't be right. You can't be right all the time. Windows has a focus mode as well. It doesn't work very well. But in our family, so one of my issues is in our family, we're half Android, half Apple.
Sure.
So we use Facebook Messenger as the common. We landed there. Wow. But I block all Facebook from my watch notifications. So I have to check my phone when my family wants to get a hold of me. It's a mess. We're in a little bit of a communication mess that way, because we don't have, even my wife says, the fastest way to get a hold of her is on Facebook Messenger, but she's like, if I'm driving home, those messages don't come through on on Android. They'll come to the car via text. So then I got to think, okay, where is she? So we've got a little bit of a mess there to kind of figure out.
You could move to WhatsApp. Honestly, I've almost, even with all of us on Apple, so therefore iMessage, I've almost moved the family to Slack. To just create a Slack workspace for the family. That way you can compartmentalize things. We've got, weekend plans and this, that, and the other thing, but you've got your direct messages and it's all in one spot. Yeah. It's almost happened a few times, and everybody in the family uses Slack with work or school or whatever. So everybody's sort of already using it. Yeah.
Well, we tried Discord because we thought,
same thing.
Let's go to Discord as a family. I can't get everybody to install the app from, family. They're like, I don't want another app to go to just for family stuff. So there's a little bit of rebellion on that. So we're kind of half and half. We started the Discord group, and then it's pretty much died and
fizzled.
Place.
Yeah.
I have a son. I have 5 kids. So I have one of my sons uninstalled Facebook he's like, I'm done. I'm like, how are we going to get hold of you? He's like, I don't know. Just figure it out.
Figure it out. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe WhatsApp is the answer, right?
Yeah, they wouldn't install it though. That's the thing. The kids would be like, yeah, no, we don't want to. It's just a little haphazard. And you know what? It kind of works. There's some moments of course, there's some moments where it's not everybody's in the same place at the same time. I don't know if we're going to get perfect communication. It was just one of those thoughts as you were talking about having, especially when you said, I've got this group that's just my family that they can get through on. It got me thinking I don't know if I have that kind of, it's individualized kind of based
Yeah.
on where people are at. So
Yeah.
it's certainly a first world problem for sure.
Well, pretty much everything, we've been doing Mac Geek Gab for 954 episodes now, and pretty much every question that comes in is a first world problem. But it doesn't mean we don't treat it like, it's a privileged thing to be able to do, and we are completely aware that we lead charmed lives, and we're very
It's a good problem to have, but
Exactly.
it is a real problem when you're trying to get a hold of somebody. And you're like, and then you got to think, okay, like what's the channel they're most likely to pick up on the quickest?
Yeah.
The same child who has kind of left or abandoned Facebook is also gigantic in the VR space. And so like, I almost then to think like, okay, if I really need to get a hold of him, I've got to find a way to get into the VR world where he's at. That's not a world I'm familiar with. I'm building a Windows computer like purposely just for VR so I can start to see like I think that's going to get well, let me ask you this question. I feel like we're still in the early days of VR, even though we've been talking about it for 15 years.
Yeah, or 30 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Any Dave, any thoughts on where it's certainly Apple doesn't seem to be in that space at all, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on VR?
It's interesting. I was having this conversation with a friend, Allison Sheridan, who does the NosillaCast over at podfeet.com the other day. And she was saying what you were saying, like, we've been saying we're right around we're on the cusp of this, but we've been saying that for 30 years. Yeah. And I think that it is still correct that we are on the cusp of this. I think we've been trained to be impatient with the progress of technology because of how quickly so many things in our lifetimes have progressed, that this idea that VR is not that much farther along than it was 20 years ago. I mean, it's been moving, but there hasn't been that breakthrough to really, bring it into the mainstream. Honestly, candidly, I should say, I'm being honest all the way through. I have yet to lie to you. But
and why would you, right?
And why would I? Yeah. But candidly, I think if the pandemic lockdowns happened 5 years from now, or we were 5 years further down this road of VR, because we're pretty close to being able to have a meaningful social interaction in a VR space. And if we had that at critical mass, or the ability for it to be quickly made into critical mass during the lockdowns, I think that would have happened. Just like Zoom happened, like prior to 2020, it was, if you wanted to do a video conference with somebody that wasn't already in that world, it was like, oh man, okay, so you got to get this software. Bear with me on this, right? But now you can call, people of any age and any technical leanings and say, yeah, let's do a Zoom call. Like, yeah, I got you, and boom, there you go. So I think we're waiting for the killer app. I have had the experience of what, like, let me explain, and I'll perhaps come up with a better way to describe it. But the meaningful experience in it, and it happened playing ping pong. For whatever reason, my son bought an Oculus Quest 2 a couple of years ago, right? And they sent him the wrong one. It didn't have the storage he was supposed to have. So Amazon sent him another and said, you've got 30 days to send the first one back. So we had two. And we played ping pong one night, and we wound up doing it actually from two different places. The ping pong was reactive enough that once you learned, really serving was the trick to learn how to do. But once we learned how to do that, it was just like we were playing ping pong. But what happened was it transcended ping pong, because when we're in the same room together playing ping pong, sure, we're playing, but we're having a conversation, and it's a meaningful conversation. But there's this ball bouncing back and forth between us, and certainly it's competitive and all of that, but the conversation just sort of happens almost separate from the game. And that exact thing happened with the headsets on. And after like 20 minutes, I was like, wait a minute. This interaction feels more real than a Zoom call. It feels more real, certainly, than a phone call or texting in that way. There was a human connection that happened that I've not experienced other than being in the same physical space with someone. And so we're there, right? Like the tech is good enough. It's just not affordable enough, or really it's that people don't have a reason to have it. That the people who want it will have it, just like Zoom 3 years ago. If you and I would probably have had it, but otherwise people are like, yeah, that's no, I don't need that. But once people did need that, then it was adopted very, very quickly. And I think the same will happen with AR and VR. Apple specifically, there is enough chatter out there to support the rumors that Apple will be releasing their VR, I'll call it a headset. I don't know if it's going to be a headset or glasses or whatever, but that I'm told is coming in January.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, what does that mean? I haven't been told this by Apple, just to be clear.
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
But do you feel confident? Okay, so I'm right in the middle of doing a Windows build.
Yep.
So I'm getting the latest AMD processor. I'm getting a pretty nice GPU. By the way, my Mac is a Mac M1 Mac Mini. So that I bought that last year.
Yeah.
Has it been out for 2 years? When did that first? Has it been 2 years now? So this January will be 2 years. I bought it as soon as it came out. I bought it live on this show. By the way, my previous co-host, Mike Weger, he was a Mac guy forever. He came on this show. He went to Windows. I think maybe I told you this when we met. He went to Windows and I went to Mac.
That's great. That's amazing.
But based on what you're saying, am I still on the right track to be building a Windows box to host this thing on? Or is there any hope that Mac would provide something for me that might work on my Mini?
Well, my guess, and this is far less informed than my January, rehashing of the January predictions. My guess is that whatever Apple comes out with will be a companion device to your iPhone, much like the Apple Watch is right now. So I think you will have to have and again, this is just gut feelings, but informed gut feelings from following Apple for 30 years or whatever. I think it will be an iPhone accessory. They will never call it that. They don't call the watch an iPhone accessory, but it basically is. So I think that's where it'll start.
Okay.
But I don't like functionality wise. It's hard to say where they're going to go with it because it's Apple.
Well, maybe both is okay. For what I'm doing, I know having a son that's in the space, he can help me navigate because it's a whole different world, right?
Oh, yeah.
Knowing the equipment and what to buy. I don't want to go all in. He's full body. Like when he does this, he's got all the things that you need to go waist down, especially, right? I mean, that's because most VR is waist up.
Waist up, sure.
He has it all. But I'm like, okay, but that's a couple $1,000. I'm like, I don't know if I'm that into it, Tim. I just want to hang out with you, or I just want you to help me navigate the space because I think that's the future. I think that's where we're going for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of hedging my bets, right? I'm going to be in a couple grand for this PC. I need it anyways. I'm going to overbuild it so I can use it as my previous Windows computer is about 9 years old. So which is fine. It still does everything I need it to do. It's a great computer. But it's probably time to get a modern GPU and get a modern CPU, right? And build those things up. So it could be I could do both and I guess that's if you had said, oh, no, we're hearing rumors of a headset and you're going to need to have the most up-to-date Mac to be able to do this or whatever.
Well, my guess is the M1, if in fact that's the direction it goes, the M1 would be more than powerful enough to do that. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I hadn't thought of that until we'd had this conversation. I've always been heading down the Windows path on this one, but just thinking, Apple really hasn't been talking about it very much, but maybe I should keep my eyes open for it.
Definitely keep your eyes open. I'm very curious for obvious reasons. Yeah.
From a Apple perspective, I feel like the ecosystem's, I don't want to say stale because that's not true. I mean, there's a lot of new things, but they're not gigantic leaps but what we used to see from them. But you're in the space every day. Am I wrong on that, or is it getting more mature?
Well, it depends on how far back we're looking in terms of like right now. What is that definition? Because the whole M1, the Apple Silicon being used in Macs, that was a quantum leap for performance, and battery consumption and heat and all of that. Like that made laptops actual laptops, so from that standpoint, it's very exciting. But we're there now. And, the difference between the M1 that's in your Mini, which is also the M1 that's in my Mini in my office, and the M1 that's in my MacBook Air that's my travel computer, there's not, for people like you and me, and I'm making assumptions about you based on our conversation here, but certainly for people like me, there's no difference between the M1 and the M2 and the Ultra and the Max and this, because I've had those devices, and it's like, well, yeah, but the M1 is still remarkably faster than I need it to be. So I don't need, I get why it should exist, but for someone who used to always buy the quote unquote pro computer because I knew I needed the horsepower, that the most horsepower I could get, that's no longer true. I don't do those kinds of pro things on my computer that require heavy CPU use. It's, yeah. So that's exciting in a very boring way, in that you just get it and the problem is magically solved and you never think about it again, which maybe is why you aren't thinking about it again, right? Because you have it, you're there, and you've taken it for granted.
Yeah. Well, this podcast grew up in an era of constantly changing. We covered a lot of Windows stuff, right?
Sure.
Constantly changing, and Windows has gotten super boring too. Like it's like,
right.
Windows
Moore's
11.
law. Well, Moore's law we threw out the window when we started parallelizing, right? But my podcast is the same way. There were always new hardware things to think about, and it wasn't until the M1 that came back for us.
Right. So you feel like that M1 is a significant departure point when we think about future technologies. What are you seeing ahead? Does that have future potential as well from what you're seeing?
Well, yeah, the M1 is the most limited version of that paradigm. The whole system on a chip thing where, you've got shared memory and the shared bus, so that to call it a shared bus is not even correct. It's just,
I understand,
it's one bus. It's just like an
omnibus.
It's the omni. I like that. That's great. Yeah. Right, but but it was as a functional for sale proof of concept, was like, oh, holy crap, like we're here. Yeah. And again, for most of us, not only is it a taste of what the future can be, it's the future. It's like, oh, this is more than I need for now. Will I need something else down the road? Sure. But it won't be for 10 years that I would need something else. I will buy something else it far sooner than that, because that's who I am. But, computers, most people don't need to replace the computer but once every 10 years. Mm-hmm. So, but in terms of the future of this, I like that paradigm will march forward, I think. So
for me, so I had M1 envy. I've said that on this show. Like it came out, I started looking at it. I'm like, this thing's amazing. I have to have one of these. And it was the first Mac that I'd had in a decade, right? I'd been pretty much a Windows guy. I had a Mac back in the old, when they still had the, what was the chip before they went Intel? PC Pro?
The PowerPC?
PowerPC chip.
Wow.
So my last laptop had the last PowerPC chip in it. And I got 7 years out of that thing post its life, and eventually put it to rest. They weren't updating it anymore. So from my M1 perspective, I've already admitted to you, I'm a guy that buys equipment. I kind of run it till it's dust. I've got Windows boxes that are 10 years old that I'm still getting a lot of value out of.
Sure.
How long do you think this M1 would last me? And then do you think at some point I'm going to want to make a jump sooner than that, kind of based on this architecture? Should I be watching for something, or do you think I'm going to be okay for a while?
I think you're going to be okay for a while. Yeah. Unless there's some use case change, right? And VR could be that use case change, right? Where it's like you need more horsepower. It's like the person that said that had dial up and said, "Well, I don't need a cable modem. I don't need broadband or whatever." And it's like, well, and what the comment would always be, my dial-up connection lets me do everything I want to do. And that was true, taking that at face value. But that meant that they weren't even aware of the benefits of doing something like you and I are doing with video conferencing, right? Like all that stuff is just off the table. And so unless there's some paradigm shift in terms of what you want to or need to do with the thing, I think your M1 and my M1 would last us 10 years. I don't think you and I are the people that will actually just rely on those for 10 years. And we'll keep them and repurpose them to other things or people in our households and offices or whatever. But because we'll replace them in 3 years.
Yeah,
so
you know me exactly.
Yeah. So what are you worried about? You're gonna replace the thing in 3 years, whether you need to or not. Why did we even have this conversation?
Well, because but I
no,
think
it's a good
others.
Conversation.
Yeah. I think there's others. I always feel like I'm the average guy, right? That's hence the branding, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm the average guy, and this thinking through, like, hey, am I going to hold on to this for 5 years? I'm already 2 years in. Is it going to be good for another 3?
Yeah.
And not, is it going to be good? Because we already know for the most part that the hardware itself is going to last way longer than we think. That
right.
in both the Windows in both the Windows space, Linux you could add in there, and the Apple space, hardware is just lasting a lot longer than it used to. The question will be, will it outlive its usefulness from that perspective? Brian's asking a question in chat, which I think kind of pertains to this. And he says, what do you think will be Apple's biggest challenge over the next decade? So as we think about not necessarily from a hardware software perspective, but what's the use case? And maybe you've touched on this a little bit, but as you look over the next decade, is it VR that's the use case, or what are you seeing out there, something that may be a challenge for them?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that when I look at Apple, and I really don't, I'm a how-to guy, right? We answer people's questions. We're very much in the now and not, so on our show, we don't do a lot of speculation, and it's just not a thing that I've ever spent a lot of time thinking about. However, when I do spend that time, I think about, okay, well, obviously the iPhone has been extremely good for Apple. That's perhaps the understatement of the decade, maybe even the century. But the iPhone won't always have the usefulness to the consumer that it currently does. And so over the next, how long does the iPhone last as the must-have device, And I don't just mean iPhones. I mean, cell phones in general in the form factor that we are currently used to. Android, iPhone, all of the Google, the Pixel. I mean, that's Android too. And I don't know, 10 years from now, is the phone the thing? Or have we moved on? And so I think, whether we have moved on in 10 years, if Apple doesn't have the next thing ready to go within the next 10 years, I think they're in real trouble. And I'm certain they know this, that, there's people at Apple, it turns out, that are much, much smarter than me, that are actually, invested and paid to answer that question and obsessively answer it. So
Apple runs the same problem that Microsoft had a decade before it. In other words, it's got a killer app that was Windows.
Yep.
But no reoccurring model of income. And certainly iPhones sell for a lot more than Windows licenses did. So that's at a different scale, right? And Apple's richer than anybody else on the planet at this point, right?
It turns out that whole build the whole widget thing actually is a profitable model.
Yeah. But at some point that spigot shuts off, right? If they don't, let's just say that the iPhone becomes less and less important. Yeah. Do you see them moving more in a subscription model? I mean, certainly we're seeing that from some storage and some other things. So let's be clear. They have the most popular app store on the planet, and they're getting reoccurring revenues from that. So it's not that they don't have any subscription plan, but I don't know. Dave, any thoughts on that from a future perspective?
Certainly services is a huge part of our daily lives, and therefore, is something Apple is happy to sell to us. They are finally, I would say, doing it in a way that people want to participate in that. They haven't always gotten that right. I think as I'm thinking about what replaces the iPhone, and so I'm sidestepping the subscription question here, but we can come back to it if you want. As I'm thinking about that, and what I was saying before about the killer app of VR, because I think Apple is heading into the VR space. Even if everybody's wrong about January, it's going to happen in certainly the next 5 years, probably a lot sooner than that. They're going to test the waters with it and see what works. But I think that the killer app for VR is a social network. Like it's a meeting place of people, right? And I could be very wrong about that. I can't see around corners like Steve Jobs could, or even like an Elon Musk could. And I know he's not the most popular guy with some people these days, but
not right now.
He's a smart guy, and he has proven that he can see around corners better than most of us too. And so I could be missing the entire beat on this, but I think it's some kind of social network, some sort of interactivity with other people. And Apple has thus far been terrible at any attempts at that. So what are they thinking with VR? And I don't mean, what are they thinking? I'm asking the question, like, what are they thinking? Like, what is their use case of VR? And if we take the iPhone accessory idea, okay, well now if I've got glasses on that are linked to my iPhone and it's more AR than VR, right? Augmented reality, where I'm getting data in a meaningful way, in a UI in a UX that actually works and isn't distracting. And it turns out Apple's pretty good at creating UXs that work and aren't distracting. We're going to, skip the conversation about the system settings app in Ventura for right now, because that sort of is the exception that proves the rule. But if it's that, then okay, but still this is a personal device, not a communicative device with AR, VR, whatever. So yeah, I think Apple's that's what they've got to figure out is what is the next thing and what's the killer app for it? Because, the iPhone is great, but if it didn't do the things that it does, well, then, we wouldn't use it. And the killer app on the iPhone, arguably, is social media. Yeah. And Apple doesn't create that.
Why do you think Mark Zuckerberg is has so much vested interest in this with Meta and Facebook that I think he gets that. He gets it 100%. Right. Yeah, totally. Now their execution's pretty poor to this point.
Well, maybe, or is maybe it too early? Like, I mean,
it's very possible.
I don't think what they're saying they're going to do is the wrong path. It's just no one currently wants that. But, think about this. We just spent, arguably 2 years at home, year and a half at home. People want to get out and see other people right now. So this idea of, I want to put a headset on. No, like it's too little, too late for that particular window this time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Dave. That makes that it does, as you're saying that makes a lot of sense to me as far as the timing goes. As we're talking about this, I am kind of thinking though, from a VR perspective, okay, they already have 2 points on us. So put a headset on and I already have my left wrist taken care of. All I'd really need is another device on my right wrist and put the phone in my pocket. And I have 3, right? This thing is designed for VR in a lot of ways, right? Because it's got so many, it knows when I'm upright. It knows when I'm laying down. It knows my geo position. It knows where I am on the planet. It knows so much about me. I hadn't really thought of it in those terms, but now I have 3 data points plus the glasses or whatever we're using for that. So that's a 4th data point. All of a sudden, VR seems pretty easy in that space, right?
Sure does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know and that's why I think it's going to be. You have to have an iPhone to make it all work. Yeah. Like I think it stays in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I just don't know what Apple's killer app is.
Yeah. It's good.
That's the big question,
It's a
because that's
good-
always been what it is, right? I mean, the Apple II was cool, and it was amazing that, and this is, again, seeing around corners, Woz wanted to put together a computer kit for people to build, and that's great. And Jobs said, why don't we build it for them? More people will buy it. And it turned out he was right, even though everybody said at the time, well, it's only nerds that are going to want these things. Well, as soon as VisiCalc came out, Dan Bricklin wrote that, and boom, that was it. You needed an Apple II at your business. Like, whoa, that's amazing.
It's the first computer I programmed on, 2E.
Same. I was on a 2C. Yeah.
No, right on. Since you're a how-to show, let me ask you a how-to question. I'll just tell the listeners I did not prepare you for this.
Stump the geek it is.
This is totally, but it's a real world example. The phone, I'm on a 12, so not the most recent, but it's been a great phone.
Yep.
I'm running the Microsoft Translator app, and it's actually a web app that I've used at work, which works really great. I feed our audio in, it transcribes it and translates it into 60 languages, which is pretty great. Now, in true Microsoft fashion, they're going to purposely break the web UI so that no longer works, and they're only going to make it available on the phone and on Android, right? iPhone and Android. Yeah. So I went out, bought some equipment, made it work, started running the app on my phone, so it was listening to this translation. And for the first time ever, this phone got super hot, physically hot. Like I've never done anything, it's not like running Zoom on a Windows PC where as soon as you turn on the video, like the fans come on, right?
Yeah.
Have you guys from user feedback or from folks talking about the phone, I've never found an app that's actually heated up the phone. This is not since my days of Android have I had a hot phone, right? And now this Microsoft Translator app is heating up the phone. Any thoughts on that from a usage perspective, or like just an experience perspective as you've had people?
Yeah, we've seen some things. It's stuff that really bangs on the GPU a lot. We've found to be the things that heat the phone. I mean, certainly things that bang on the CPU a lot would also do that, but on the phone, generally the way people have coded for it, it's the things that are really using the GPU. But it's possible Microsoft wrote it without that in mind, and therefore, I mean, like that whole idea would work so much better on a GPU, because it's sort of built for that.
On a PC with the GPU is what.
But the iPhone's got a pretty powerful GPU in there. Yeah. So, but I mean, doing that translation in real time, that's not
really
insignificant.
Good, it's really good.
And remember, the phone doesn't have, it's not built to run at full speed, right? The CPU and the GPU are overpowered so that you are never running at full speed, and therefore you're not just burning through battery. It's being super efficient. But when you have something that bangs on it, then it's going to get hot. Yeah. We've certainly seen it. Yeah.
Well, it's heated up enough that it's affected the battery life for the moment. Like the battery life significantly decreases during that time, right?
Yeah.
Which it would make sense. Heat and batteries don't get along. Cold and batteries don't get along really well. Apparently they like a good like us. They like a good, nice temperature, right?
Yeah.
It was just a huge surprise to me. Like I had it out, and listen, I run this over like a podcast, like an hour. So I'm running this thing for a solid hour. It's listening in English. It's translating, not necessarily, but it's doing some and they must have pushed that transcription. I thought it was going to the cloud and transcribing it.
Clearly not. No,
obviously not.
Well, if it is, it's really poorly written software. well, I mean, I'm just saying
that's possible too.
And that's the other thing, right? Is it, I tell the story for people that aren't programmers, back like when we had to code on our Apple IIs, right? That was a 1 megahertz machine. And so we had to be super efficient with the way we coded things. Nowadays, again, devices are generally built so that the expectation is that the code will be efficient and it runs at, 5 to 10% of what the device is capable of, but it doesn't stop you from writing inefficient code. In high school, my physics teacher gave us this project where we had to build an electric motor. And so, and he gave us some plans for it. And my classmate partner and I got together and we did the things you're supposed to do. And we wrapped the motor and, did the wires and connected the leads. And it was a magnetic thing and, simple little motor. And they say connect it to a 9-volt battery. And so we did. And we watched it move like, maybe 10 degrees off center. And it needed to go 180 degrees to get the next pulse to send it around, to kick it around. We tried all kinds of, it's like, well, we got to, clearly there's some friction here. Maybe we rewrap the wire. So we spent hours doing this. And no, it's not working. And like, well, it's due tomorrow. So I guess we bring it in and we see what happens. And I brought it home after we worked on it and mentioned it to my dad. And my dad's like, well, you have a power problem. And I'm like, oh, he's like, go to the garage and get a car battery and try it. And I did. And that thing spun around, it almost jumped off its peg. And so I called my friend Rich and I'm like, we're solved. And he's like, is that allowed? And I said, yep, I went through the things. There's no limitation on what your power source is. I'm like, great. So I walked into my high school with not only the car battery, but this bundle of wires, right? Like there's zero chance you'd ever get into a high school these days with what I walked in that day in, 1988 or something. But I walked into my physics class and my teacher started laughing. He says, I've been waiting 20 years for this. He said, there's probably one person in the class whose parent helped them wrap this exactly the right way so that it works with a 9-volt battery. And as people were coming in, he asked, and certainly there was this one, one woman in the class, one girl in the class. And so it was like, yep. And he said, all right, here's the deal. Cause I've thought about this. You're allowed to use that, but you have to let everyone else in the class use your car battery too, because they need the same chance that you've brought in. And I said, okay, well, they didn't bring their own car batteries, but fine, your classroom, your rules. I said, my car battery, I pick the order in that my team is going first. I don't know how much juice is in this thing that's been sitting in my garage. Probably has more than enough for the silly little motors that we built. And sure enough, everybody passed for the first time ever. Anybody that bothered to build the motor passed. But that's potentially what we're talking about with, you can write sloppy code today and it will still run. It's just, it'll peg your CPU.
Yeah.
So, but we've all got car batteries when most of our code should be written for 9 volts.
Right.
And most of it is, to be fair, like most people write pretty efficient code. So,
well, this really worked well on PC. Like it worked well on Mac. Like not that part mattered, but in the desktop world, this application worked fabulously. I don't understand, and I kind of know why. I mean, it's like I'm not using it as they intended it to be a translator between you and me.
Oh,
so we would be in person,
I
and
see. Of course,
we would put the phone between us, and we'd have this conversation, right? And it here I am feeding a full length podcast into it. That's then going out to the whole planet, and I've got dozens or hundreds of people potentially watching the translations. I mean, it's a beautiful use case for it.
Well, now that you're saying that, though, I wonder if the issue is RAM usage, right? Because is it the kind of thing where it just assumes, or the programmer assumed, so therefore the app assumes, that you could just store each bit of text or bit of spoken audio in RAM and then just process it, and then it would end, and you could flush RAM and you're good to go. But you're just pumping something and never stopping. And so then is it having to swap out because there's not enough RAM on the phone to do this? And that swap operation where you're, thrashing, I mean, it's all memory, but you're kind of thrashing the disk, that would heat things up. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we don't get to look, we can't run activity monitor on an iPhone in a way that would be helpful to us. So
unfortunately, pretty closed ecosystem. And Just like pop in there. I should try it on Android just to be fair. I should try it on an Android device to see if I get the same kind of result. But what you're saying makes perfect sense to me, and is watching it doing its translating and knowing the longer I got in the webcast, the worse like it struggled. And sometimes it'd even get behind on, like I might be 5 or 10 minutes behind, or I might just stop. And so maybe
Yeah.
there's no,
I bet it's a RAM thing.
no garbage collection.
Yeah. Well, it's not intentionally sort of processing things out. It's just the assumption is it's never going to get so full that it's a problem.
Yeah, no one would ever force an hour worth of a podcast.
Right.
I'm sure. So I did contact, I'm trying to work through my employer's relationship with Microsoft to see if I can get in on the inside with somebody and just be like, hey, I'm trying to do this. And they'll probably try to sell me Azure or something along those lines.
Yeah, of course.
But
yeah.
But it literally was, back in the day of the early Android phones, they would burn a hole in my pocket if I tried to use them for anything because they just get so hot.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time since I've gone to the iPhone. I've never really heated up my phone. It's never really been warm for any reason, unless I left it on the dash on my car, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of those things I was like, oh, like this is new. I haven't pushed an iPhone to the point where it's gotten warm, and it's physically warm. And
I've had mine get warm like after either when you get a new phone and it's pulling down all the apps, or if you wipe your phone and it's just pulling down apps. But that's, using the Wi-Fi nonstop. It's storing things nonstop. So I felt it get warm there. And that's what makes me think, is there a storage element to what you're doing that is causing that heat?
Good. It's good. I just love to get some feedback to Microsoft to say this isn't one of their flagship apps. So, but I'd like to get like, hey, there's actually a great use case for this. I'm using it. Like, help me if we can feed some things in. Now there's services that are doing this. So it's just nice because Microsoft made this available for free.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, why not get 60 languages out of it in our user base? It was super great. Dave, as you think about, I ask you a future facing question, but not thinking about a year or two, but thinking about what's coming up for you guys on Mac Geek Gab as you think about end of the year. What kind of topics are going to land in the podcast there? What do you guys think you'll be covering? Everybody covers, all the tech guys cover, Black Friday and Christmas and stuff like that. But what's coming up for you guys?
Well, so we have our own sort of angle on all of that. It is the holiday season. There's lots of cool tech that comes out this time of year. And so we have a segment to the show that we call Cool Stuff Found. I know it's not the most original thing, but it's certainly descriptive.
I like it.
No, it works. It's one of those things that just sort of, we started calling things cool stuff, and it was like, well, it's Cool Stuff Found. And so we and our listeners are always on the lookout for new things, tech that's going to make our lives better. And there's been a lot lately, and the queue is full. So I'm excited about, sharing all the cool things. We've expanded the amount of time we give to that segment, as we often do this time of year. Just because there's, lots of cool things. Robot vacuums are a huge hit. Yeah. If you folks aren't using a robot vacuum yet, the new Eufy X8 is spectacular and so smart. So smart. So
okay. I may have to check that out. Erin Lawrence, who's on here a lot, she's a Canadian reviewer.
Okay.
And she's gotten all into the robot vacuum cleaners. Like on her site, you can go see all the reviews. She's done them all. And I talked about it for the longest time. My wife could probably hear me talk, so I'll say this really loud so she hears me. But for the longest time, I was like, we ought to get one of those. She's like, you don't need a vacuum. You don't need a robot. In fact, my daughter said to me, Dad, it's the only thing you get exercise with. So, because I do the vacuuming in the house.
Sure.
It's like, do you really want to cut off your only kind of form of this during the pandemic? Do you only want to cut off your only form of exercise? Well, then I went a couple weeks without vacuuming the house. Maybe it was like 4 or 5 weeks. I got a little lazy, and she said, actually that robot vacuum cleaner doesn't sound too bad.
So we have ours run. Now we have them on every floor. On the floor that we don't sleep on, I have them run at 4 a.m. every day. And we get to wake up either with the vacuum having eaten a pipe cleaner, because the cats love to play with pipe cleaners and leave them around, or a nice clean floor. And it's awesome. We used to vacuum maybe once a week because that's what you generally do. And now it's like, oh yeah, I can't even imagine going a week.
Do you spend a lot of time on the app seeing what it's doing and scheduling it, or do you just kind of set it once, set it and forget it?
So the original ones, I had to be very careful with setting the no-go zones and, all that stuff. That Eufy X8, and this has been, this is true about sort of the current crop from most vendors. They've gotten so much smarter. Not only do they have LiDAR sensors now, some of them have cameras. They are just super smart about the way they will map a room and efficiently go and clean and all of that stuff. So that Eufy X8, I have that currently on our ground floor of our house, which is like, a minefield for a robot vacuum. I've never had a robot vacuum that I didn't have to spend, weeks tweaking to get it so that I didn't wake up with it stuck somewhere. Yeah. I set up that Eufy thing and I left and I came back and it was sitting on its dock full of all the stuff it had picked up. Like it did not run into a single problem. And it's been that way ever since. I haven't done a thing to it. I just, just let it run. It's awesome.
Yeah. I think I need one for the basement. This is the area where it could probably get the most usage.
Yep.
And picks up probably the most dirt. The garage it's right off the garage.
It's the ground floor. Yeah, exactly.
Right. All that stuff comes in. Do you have so did you do a review of that? Is that available somewhere, folks?
Yeah, we did it on Mac Geek Gab, and then we carved out the segment, and it's on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@MacGeekGab.
And just MacGeekGab.com will get you there as well if you want to.
You got it.
Check it out. And I would say, listen, among podcasters, if you're a Mac guy at all, if you're an Apple guy at all, you should be listening to Mac Geek Gab. There's a lot of great information. You guys cover a lot of great stuff. It is the at times I think kind of a great nerdery going on right around.
Well, we always say you don't have to be a geek to listen, but if you listen, you'll become a geek.
Listen, geek is your middle name. Let's just be clear about that.
That's correct.
From a show like Home Gadget Geeks, you're in most favored nation status with us.
And same.
That's super great. So thanks for Dave. Thanks for taking a few minutes to come on and be a part of the show. And thanks for coming out. Maybe we got to plan like an annual or something. To have you back on a regular basis. Maybe around important events or important updates or just a time to get. Like, how do we condense what your audience would normally, would you spread out over a couple months? How could we condense that down for the average guy just to get the most important stuff? I don't know. Something. Think about that.
No, I'll think about that as trends develop, and they do. I'll think about how to consolidate them, and then we'll get together and
have you come back on and get the skinny from you and get it in a way. This has been a lot of fun. So I appreciate you coming on and spending time with me and keeping our audience up to date. What's been crazy is our audience was primarily Windows. I think 10 years ago, they would they'd be stringing me out for having.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Like,
yeah.
Why did you have the
we
Mac
don't talk politics on the show because we're polarizing enough. I admit that I use a Mac and an iPhone. So.
Oh, hey, hold on. One more question on this. There used to be this huge division. Like it was pretty religious about Microsoft versus Apple. I feel like that's kind of gone away.
I agree. It
so?
Never existed for me. And I say that I had my preference, and especially when I was doing a bunch of tech support on Windows devices, I knew for certain that the decision I made to have Apple devices in my home was the right one. Especially this was like in the late 90s, early 2000s. Windows machines. I mean, it was great. It was a gold mine for tech support, but completely unreliable compared to the way the Mac is. That was as far as my religion went. I would have people ask me, Windows users, say, are you going to try and convince me to use the Mac, or will you try and convince me to use the Mac? And my answer would always be no. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You got to convince me that what you have is wrong for you and that you should switch platforms, because it's not a fun process switching platforms, or learning a new platform. If you know them both, then that's different. But if you're only used to one, far be it from me to make your life harder. My job is to make your life better. So I never tried to convince people to switch unless it was obvious that was the right thing. And, but it was very rare. Yeah. Well,
I tried to go with the Windows phone for a while. I was Android, and then I tried to go Windows Phone when they did it. And then finally, I just need a phone that worked. And so
Apple's good at that. Yeah.
Just saying, it just worked, and I've never looked back. Two comments. Brian says I really enjoyed the show, so thanks. And then Uncle Marv, to my question about the being, he does not agree, right?
Oh yeah.
No,
okay.
right. He does not agree, and that's okay.
That's totally fine. Yeah, we have our perspectives. Yeah,
you can disagree on it. I just don't feel like, to be honest with you, I don't feel like it's much of a, even in our enterprise where I work. We've kind of brought in our designers and such, and even some of our developers need Macs. They just need them.
Sure.
And so we figured out how to support them and get them in the system. And it doesn't seem to be that,
it's so much easier to share and collaborate across platforms now too. And maybe that's the reason for this, because I agree with you that it's just, it's not the holy war that it was back in the 90s. But I will say this, VI is much better than Emacs. We'll leave it at that.
All right. So
with that, if you want a holy war, let's go all the way back. That's right. Let's go back to the first one, at least in Nerdland. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, right on. And trust me, we've had Marv comes back. He says, okay, so they play together in the sandbox a little nicer than before. And I think that is true. The cloud has certainly changed all of that, right? As we think about bringing those together in an environment where we don't really care, we don't really care about that OS anymore. I have a Mac in the middle of my system here. I have a Mac in the middle and two PCs, two Windows boxes on the side. One's Windows 11 and Windows 10. And I've tried to make it, Dave, in a way that I don't know what I'm on. Like that's maybe on the next episode, we'll talk about, next time I have you back in, I'll ask you this question. But I leave everything stock just for those reasons. I don't customize anything on any of even my phone is nearly as stock as possible because I want to be able to switch it out, or if it goes bad, just turn it on and it just kind of works out of the gate.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. That's been a strategy that's worked for having multiple operating systems on my desktop by keeping them stock.
That.
Yeah. It's worked pretty well. And to be honest, Windows 11 is looking more and more like.
Well, it's true. Yeah. I mean, Well, when something, and I mean, there have been design and UX elements from both, like that go both directions, and the same true with Android to iPhone and iPhone to Android, there's a lot that they borrow from each other, and as they should, because if it works, well,
Right. No. Right on. Good stuff. Okay. One more encouragement. Head out MacGeekGab.com. Make sure you get signed up, subscribe to the podcast, make sure you're out there, make sure you're doing stuff. Dave, I've kept you on long enough. I'm going to let you go. I'll wrap up the show here, but thanks for coming on. Think about, maybe first of the year or after the first of the year, if you get a sweet spot where you want to come on and you kind of know the audience and you kind of know what we talk about. If you get a spot where you're like, hey, can we do this thing? Just bring me up and I'll throw you on.
Amazing. Sounds great. I look forward to it.
I'll let you go and then I'll close things up on this end. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Have a good evening. Okay, couple reminders as Dave is on his way out there. A couple reminders for you guys if you want to subscribe to the show. If you want to get actually easy access to it, HomeGadgetGeeks.com will get you there as well. If you want to join the Discord group, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. If you want to join us on Patreon, theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. And if you want to support us from a platform perspective, you can sign up for a hosting plan out at Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. Of course, that's Christian. If you want to get plans that start as little as $10 a month, head out to maplegrovepartners.com. And then don't forget, if you want to leave me a voicemail, if you got a question, head out to homegadgetgeeks.com, leave the voicemail, then email me, jim@theaverageguy.tv, so that you know, or that I know what you're getting. We are what you said, because I don't always get the notifications on that one, but it is an easy way to leave a voicemail message. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. Big thanks to Dave Hamilton, who came out from Mac Geek Gab. I'm serious. You're going to love the podcast. It's like, I went out and listened to a couple episodes, and I think if you like what we do here, you're going to like what they're doing over there. Yeah, you might be saying, "Oh, Jim, I don't have a Mac." Well, it's okay. Give it a try. Go out there and listen to it and see what you think. They're they're a bunch of good guys, and I think you give it a couple episodes. You might go back and listen to a couple past episodes. You might be surprised. That may be one that you add to your list. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. I think I'm going to be off next week. Just as a reminder for you live folks, most people don't make it all the way to the end. Yeah. So actually the next 2 weeks, although I have this tradition of bringing Samantha, my daughter, on for the Thanksgiving, that Friday episode. We still might do that. I'll have to talk to her about that to see. I don't know. Would you guys come out on a Friday? Would you guys come out on a Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving, if I had Samantha on? I don't know. Give me a quick. I've done that, I think, the last 2 years, maybe, because she was always home from college for doing that. I don't have it on the schedule, but we may do it that Friday. Yeah, it'd be good to catch up with her. Why don't I say I'm going to do that? I'll ask her. I haven't asked her yet, but I'll ask her. And then Uyghur's back on the 1st. So December 1st, Mike Uyghur is joining us. I'm sure we'll talk about this episode because he's still kind of a Mac guy. And so he'll be back as well. So join us there. We're live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. If you joined us live, thanks for coming out. I'll stay around for a smidge post show. With that, we'll say goodbye.